Hello, everybody. My hashtag Happy Hybrid viewers. This is Christy Casey Sanders from Plan Your Meetings. And before we got started with our next keynote, I just wanted to take a minute to recap some of the ideas that were happening while we were kind of taking a virtual broadcast break. There was still a lot of activity happening here. And so what we were doing was we had generated thousands of ideas that you may have seen us tweeting out on Post-it notes and tweeting about. And so the goal of the past hour was really to figure out how we could narrow down all those really great ideas to one big actionable idea per category. And so we had a really interesting collaborative exercise. And the rules of the exercise were we had 15 categories. And when we started, you picked whatever category was interesting to you, and then you gravitated towards that table. And on that table, there was a big cardboard box. And the big box was for you to write your ideas on, and then you had 15 minutes with the people that you were with to narrow down to one great idea that you wanted to use. Then you went to a different table. There were a couple of rules. The first rule was whoever comes to your table is the right person to be at your table. The second rule was if you don't like the discussions, move. It's the law of 2 feet. Go to another table. Another rule was as ideas are being thrown out, just jot them on the side of the box, and at the end, narrow it down to one idea. So each group had a couple of minutes where they could do that. So there were great ideas that were shared at the very end. They had people who were very passionate come up and share the ideas. So here is a summary of some of the big ideas. So for waste, just making sure that everyone's communicating with each other, that all the key stakeholders know actually what they're responsible for and why sustainability is important, and have a common thing that you're all working towards that you can measure by. For carbon emissions and energy, there's a lot of controversy about carbon offsets. Whether or not they're credible, what the value actually is. So the solution was to come up with a program that combines incentives for people to participate, regulations so people can trust them, and tax benefits so that there's a real business advantage to being sustainable. And it was suggested that GMIC could itself be the organizer to spearhead this kind of development and movement. Food and beverage, I noticed visually was probably one of the most popular topics. We had multiple tables of people who were discussing sustainable food and beverage ideas. A couple of the big ideas that came out of that was to make your clients and your vendors accountable and aware of where in the system the waste is happening. So if you could get everybody in the room, if you could get your caterers, the chef, the NGOs that you might donate the food to, the venue, the conference planner, if you can get them all into the room to identify where you could minimize waste in the food and beverage chain, as well as to talk about their stakeholder. Well, what exactly is their stake? What do they have control over? There was a social enterprise and community section. So their big idea was, we should be working as an events community to find mutual enrichment opportunities and commit to measuring the impact of our CSR activities, of our community outreach programs, of our economic impact throughout the year, and then sharing those stories. Education and training. They feel like the industry, that everything is really kind of moving towards social media, and that if you don't know how to operate on social media, or you don't know how to communicate those stories on social media, you're kind of missing out. So they felt like a big part of the education and the training piece of sustainability had to be on creating a social media education plan. They also found, so now I'm going to move to technology. Nobody was actually brave enough to get up and talk about it, but somebody did come by as I was filming the boxes to explain to me what they discovered, and I thought it was really interesting because currently there is a big gap right now between people and between technology. If you could bridge that gap with education and put procedures in place that help them utilize the technology, that would really help bridge that gap. The water team was talking about the importance of conservation, awareness, and education, that we have to psychologically raise awareness of how much we waste if we just leave the water running when we're brushing our teeth and things like that. we need to psychologically raise the awareness, and we also need to challenge facilities to move towards adoption of low-flow toilets and reusing gray water for landscaping and things like that that will reduce consumption of water. There was a communications group. Their two big ideas, because there were two different groups, sharing success stories with a greater audience through media relations, sharing what worked, how you can do it too, becoming the experts, and really turning it into a competition so that you have hotels and venues and suppliers that are all working towards a common green rating and a common goal in kind of a fun, competitive way. There was a report and measure group, and what they found is that the story that we're telling as a sustainable events community really is not consistent. So if we could agree on 3 consistent measures, or 5, or 2, or 1, something that's simple and global so that we can track it as we move around the world, so that we can unite. So it's not just there are British standards here and there are American standards here, or there's EU standards here, but so that we can have a couple of different things we can hang our hat on. There was a procurement group, which also kind of fell under the Just Ask umbrella. And they were talking about how, it's hard to control how people buy, but if you have the ability to do so in your job description, then your compensation and your bonuses should be tied to sustainable measures. And, they really want to continue to drive sustainability into core RFPs. The other thing that one of the other procurement groups brought up is that we have tremendous purchasing power as an events industry. We have 10 times the purchasing power of Walmart. So it's time to stop asking your clients permission and to start using your power to push the agenda forward. There was a revolution group, which was discussing big ideas and new models. And so they thought that, if we could gamify sustainable CSR activities and replace, kind of the regular team building activities like an amazing race, if instead we could create a sustainable giving back activity. For example, how many meals can you make in teams? And then, how much of this playground can you assemble? Or, how much food could you sort at this food bank? Something where you could take people who are naturally competitive, like a sales team during an incentive or training, and then just kind of slightly push them into the right direction to do social good. We're about to start in just a couple of minutes, so people are getting seated. So one of my favorite ideas was, how do you create a safe and comfortable environment to fail? And I thought what was really brilliant is to make a competition out of it, where people can share failures, and at the end of the day, you vote. So I am going to go ahead and show you now what we're doing. So I'll catch you up on the rest of the ideas after this.
And do a collaborative discussion, and we're going to present some content. So you can sit back and relax a little bit, but do pay attention, because we are going to be doing a bit of collaborative work around some of this stuff tomorrow. And so feel free to take notes, and there's going to be some very interesting content. I'll be back in a minute to introduce the next session, but let me first introduce Head of Sales Development for Guidebook, Kelly Nightingale, to introduce.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Paul, and thank you for having us here. Guidebook's very excited to be a part of this event today. I'm going to go ahead and get it started. So the first topic we're going to be discussing today is taking practical steps and making good choices, and that's something that Guidebook cares deeply about. I'm going to share just a brief story about one of our clients with you. This client's name is Tracy, and she manages the Renaissance Society of America and all of the events that they hold. They have one annual meeting that has been hosted for 60 years, and she is primarily in charge of all of the printing and printed material at that event. So she came to Guidebook because for the past however many years she's been planning the event, she's been printing all of the material. And what this has turned into is an 850-page booklet that she passes out to all of her attendees. And we know that that is just not a sustainable practice. So she came to Guidebook and she asked what we could do to help her make this event more sustainable. So we took her past year's conference, so the 2013 conference, we helped her take mobile. And this really benefited Tracy in 2 ways. The first was that she was able to provide the most up-to-date and accurate information to her attendees, which she couldn't do in the past when she was printing out the booklet. And the second thing that it allowed her to do was save up to $30,000 in terms of printing costs and materials. So that's a huge savings for Tracy. So at Guidebook, we really focus on sustainability. We want to reduce we want to reduce the amount of money that you spend on printing costs for signage, for booklets, for schedules. So all of that you're able to take mobile with Guidebook. So with that, thank you so much for having us at the event. We really would like you to keep in mind taking your next event mobile. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so we're going to roll right through. So this next session should be very interesting. I asked these couple of characters, friends of mine, to put together essentially sort of a list of practical steps, you know, because we always sort of face when we're working in exhibit halls or just across our events, you know, a lot of the questions that we get are like, what are some good practical steps and how do you make good choices when you're planning your events? And I've asked Kate Hurst, who's the head of events for USC, to moderate this session. She's going to do a bit of a moderated discussion with these two guys. So please welcome Kate and the Director of Sustainability for Freeman Company, Jeff Chase, and the Chair of the Sustainability Committee for the Exhibit Design and Producers Association and the author of The Green Edge, Tom Bowman.
Okay, hello everyone. I know it's late in the afternoon, so I hope you guys are all wide awake. We're going to start right off, and the first question I'm going to pose to these gentlemen is, are there some rules of thumb exhibitors can use to reduce the environmental impacts of shows and meetings?
Can I start that?
Go right ahead.
There are a lot of things to do, but the first thing to understand is that in the exhibit space, everybody's focused on buying a green exhibit. They think it's all about the build. And you need to put this in context. You build an exhibit average every 5 years. Truth is you could build one every 10 years, but you pay an environmental penalty every time you take it to a show in shipping and drayage and transportation and on-site activities. So the first thing is to zoom out and look at the overall footprint that surrounds an event, not just at the property itself. And that means air transportation, going to and from the show, which is usually the biggest part of our footprint. Strategies for shipping your exhibits around the country so we reduce the trucking footprint as we go. And then lastly, I think we start looking at what the properties are made out of and how long you keep them.
Totally agree. And I think one of the trends that we're seeing is, you know, obviously lighter and better, you know, more compact, and then, you know, how we design the booths nowadays. So there's definitely different trade-offs and ways to do things to reduce that footprint.
So can you speak to how you would minimize unnecessary air travel?
Yeah, this is the great challenge in our industry because the event or exhibit manager generally doesn't have any control over who tends the show for their company, right? And I've worked with big companies that'll send 100 people to a show. And everybody's going, half of them are going there for 1 or 2 meetings. And when you think of a trade show, on the one hand, it's a great place to do business because everybody's there. You know, all of your customers are there, your competitors are there, the news media is there, your supply chains are there. It's terrific for that. On the other hand, because everybody's there, it's a terrible place to have certain kinds of meetings because there's so much competition. And so the best thing you can do is really question internally, what's the value of each person who travels to a show? Is it possible that if the show is in Orlando and I'm in California, that somebody who works in an East Coast office could stand in for me at that particular show, and maybe we find another way to communicate so that I stand in for them when the show's in Orange County, California, or San Francisco. And then secondly, when you do have to fly nonstop. Because airplanes use much more fuel and create much more pollution climbing to altitude than they do cruising. And when you fly with connections, you go off course for usually hundreds of miles before you go back on. So as bad as the footprint is for flying, it's a smaller footprint if you fly nonstop.
You definitely want to get your procurement team to hear that so that when
That's
that
right.
flight's just a little bit more expensive, but it's a nonstop, that's the reason it's sustainable. use that as a good, tool
a
for
hook.
that.
It's also probably better for our human health, right?
It is.
So what are some space-saving strategies that you've used to minimize shipping?
Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, when you're trucking and shipping things across country or you're doing things, it's all about how you crate things and how you build the crates and how much can go into that crate and how you cube out the space. There's nothing worse than just shipping everything on a floor load where you say you can't stack on top of it, because a lot of trucks going across country, fill up all of the top load and cube it out so that they get the most value out of it. Or if you're sending something FedEx or anything like that, it all gets stacked in and jammed in. It doesn't just lay on the floor. It's literally packed floor to ceiling. So when you're thinking about this, think about how big of a booth you're sending, whether you can actually make it, have your booth made, rent locally, and add part of your booth, rent some of it and bring some of your other parts, maybe make it out of a stretch fabric material that the whole booth can actually be brought down and be packed up in a small one pallet scenario. I've seen that done many times. It's not so good for Freeman,
Right.
from the
It's not
weight
good for you.
perspective,
It's good for you.
But it's good for us. It's good for the industry. And so,
Yeah.
and we know that. And that's where Freeman actually looks at that right now, and the whole world of the weight and how much comes through. It's a changing world we're in.
It is. There's a myth in the exhibition industry that lightweight exhibits cause less pollution on the road. And the analysis by Rocky Mountain Institute, various state governments, and others is that the weight of exhibit payloads in trucks is utterly meaningless, because the truck already weighs 30 to 50,000 pounds, right? It weighs 30,000 pounds empty. So when you fill it up with exhibits, you're pushing that maybe to 55 or 60,000 pounds. You can't save enough weight in your exhibit to make a difference in terms of fuel economy,
Right.
because most of the energy of driving the truck goes into pushing the air out of the way. So the more important thing to do with trucks is to pack them as full as you possibly can. And that means you want your exhibit to pack as tightly as it possibly can and make room for other exhibits on the same truck, so we have fewer trucks on the road overall.
Great, that's very interesting. So let's talk about the exhibits. Which is greener, keeping the older exhibits, exhibit properties, or buying new, more sustainable?
Right, this is one of my
replacements?
I don't know. Let me refer to my Green Edge book
There you go.
and just see if I can find
Yeah.
that answer in here. Oh,
You'll-
sorry.
You'll find a lot about that in that book. The reason is because we buy exhibits based on the tax depreciation schedule. We buy them because the IRS tells us we can.
Right.
We don't buy them because they're worn out. In order to build an exhibit out of materials that will tolerate being shipped across the country 2 or 3 times, you have to build them out of furniture-grade materials. And furniture-grade materials are meant to last a decade or 15 years. And we, in our design firm, learned this because some of our clients couldn't afford to buy a new exhibit after 5 years. The average is depreciation runs to 0 after 5 years. You're tired of your exhibit, you buy a new one. You keep it 5 years, and it's time to replace it. What we discovered is if we treat it like a box of Legos and we color it with new skins and we reorganize the floor plan and just build a few new components to alter the look,
Right.
give it fresh graphics and all of that, those properties will last 10 to 15 years. So there's a rule of thumb about that. And then you expense all of that, so you still get a tax deduction on it every single year, and you're spending a whole lot less money, right?
That's right.
Again, it's bad for Freeman, it's bad for a lot of exhibit builders, but it makes a lot more sense. And the basic rule of thumb about how long you keep properties is if they don't use energy, keep them for as long as you can.
That's right.
If they use energy, but the energy efficiency isn't improving, keep them for as long as you can. But if they use energy and energy efficiency is always improving, then replace them more often, because the amount of energy you save in use will outweigh the amount of energy.
So you're talking about lighting or
Lighting.
electronics, like a flat screen TV or
That's
something.
exactly right. If it can come with an Energy Star logo, Energy Star is a progressive program. It's a competitive program, and as soon as half the products in a category meet the standard, then the EPA raises the benchmark for Energy Star. So it's driving constant innovation. So if you always buy Energy Star for lighting, refrigerators, appliances, monitors, you're always at the cutting edge of efficiency, which makes a lot of sense.
Sure. So I can't imagine keeping a booth for 10 to 15 years. I'm curious, has anybody in the audience kept their booth that long? I think our marketing department would have a
right, but we have a
serious heart attack.
client. We have a client who's done that, and we repainted. It's painted with a kind of paint called Zolatone, which is very pretty durable. And we change the colors every 2 years or so, and other exhibitors will come up to the exhibit manager and say, "How can you afford to build new exhibits so often?" And she takes them around to the back side where the back sides of the panels are trashed and spray painted and repaired and covered with stickers from different shows, But you can't tell that from the front. And that's the trick, right? All we're building are facades. We're not really building the internal guts that anybody cares about.
Very true.
So as long as the facade looks nice, it doesn't matter what it's made
So
of.
besides Energy Star, are there other things that exhibitors should consider when they are at that place that they're building a new booth?
Well, I think definitely you use the right materials to start with. Definitely want to go to the FSC forest certified products, sustainable products. You want to make sure that you're building it to either, with the life cycle of the whole booth in mind. What you're going to build it, you're going to use it, and then what's going to happen to it at the end. Or can we repurpose it into another division, or can we know that once the corporate group's done with it, that we can give it to a regional group and they can reuse it for another couple of years. So there's definitely multiple uses or multiple ways, and then at the very end of its life cycle, that it all is recyclable. So.
And exactly, and think about how the booth property fits into your overall program. So as you said, Jeff, if you think about whether to build your exhibit out of hard wooden walls or build it out of aluminum struts with stretched fabric that have graphics on them instead, you're looking at whether you're building an exhibit that fills a truckload of crates or all packs onto one small pallet, right? And you're going to pay a shipping penalty and a drayage penalty every time you have a truckload of crates at every show. Whereas if it packs smaller, you're going to pay less money and it's going to be less pollution and so forth over its life cycle. So your construction and design decision impacts all of these other things about
for the whole life of the booth.
Another example is when Cliff Bar Company was getting started, they were a relatively small exhibitor, and they took furniture out of their offices to use as their display counters in their exhibits and just hauled them to the show and hauled them back. So they were using properties all the time for double duty and not building a dedicated property for the show. There's lots of strategies to think about if you look at the bigger picture.
Great. Well, those are some really great tips. How about the on-site practices? What are some of the most practical and sustainable ways to operate the show floor?
Well, just taking up on this tip of bringing your furniture in and taking it back out, we see a lot of trends today that where, people are not shipping things, they're actually buying and purchasing local, so they're actually getting things local or bringing in from their local offices, things like that, and so trying to find a way to not ship things across the country. So for me, a big tip on show site is trying to understand what you really need. Like you talked about earlier, really do you need that person to be there for 2 meetings, fly all the way. If it's Paris, we love Paris.
We love Paris.
I need, yes. I've got 2 meetings and then the rest of the time I'm just enjoying Paris.
I'm going to be at the Musée d'Orsay, of course, and drinking wine. The other thing is that it absolutely makes zero sense to ship boxes of literature to shows, because think about what happens. You print it at the last minute, right? So you're paying a surcharge to print the stuff, and then you're going to air ship it to the show in most cases because it's happening at the last minute.
That's
that costs a lot of money, and it's horrible air pollution and carbon pollution. And then you're paying a premium to this guy to get it into the hall, to your booth. And then you distribute a percentage of it.
10% mostly, yeah.
And most of the rest of it you either don't want to take home with you.
Oh, they don't want to ship it back out.
Right. Or if you do ship it back out, it sits in your exhibit house's warehouse until it's out of date and you throw it away then. What happens for the 10% you give away? 90% of it goes in the trash before anybody gets on an airplane to fly home.
At their hotel room, yeah.
So literature on site is an extraordinarily expensive way to take trees and turn them into landfill waste with a lot of pollution in between, and that's really all you're doing. So eliminating brochures and product sheets and converting to e-brochures. There are companies now that will be in cahoots with you if you're the show planner, show organizer, and put everybody's literature on a thumb drive or in an website
or on
access
a mobile,
only.
like Guidebook, who just is sponsoring this session.
Exactly. So lots of alternatives. And then pack out what you pack in. One of the
That's a biggie.
The Moscone Center waste manager told me her biggest problem is abandoned exhibits. Exhibitors just go home and they'll pay the general contractor to dismantle it and throw it away for them, so they pay something for that. But it goes into the waste stream of the convention center rather than, it's not, they're basically not taking responsibility for their own
Well, I see it a
properties.
lot on international booths. So you see a lot of people coming in from the outside that come into the United States, and their mentality in other countries is they don't have a lot of storage space in a lot of these places, and so they build their booths and then they just destroy them at the end. They're built very flimsy, just out of a really one-time use material, not the furniture grade that you're talking about, and they paint them and fix them on site, and then after the show's over, they're just ready to tear them down and throw them in the dumpster. So we have a lot of that going on in a lot of the shows that have international exhibits. And so if you're a show manager with that scenario, you really need to take that into mind and realize that you've got two different functions here. You've got U.S. exhibitors who are maybe used to reusing and repurposing their stuff, but you may have an international group that's coming in and they're just walking away from their booth.
So what is the solution for the show manager? How do you solve that problem? And are there shows that you've seen come up with solutions that have done it really well?
If only there were a show called Green Build that had...
if only.
Yeah, USGBC's show is the only show I know of that has a regulation for environmental performance that exhibitors have to adhere to. And part of that is you have to reuse your properties. You cannot deliver a single-use property to Green Build, as far as I understand it, right?
Yeah, there's mandatory green guidelines that everybody has to sign on to as a part of their contract, so they're already committing to a baseline, and then we do a 10% audit of our show floor. But as we talked about earlier before we came on stage, that's kind of unique too.
It is unique.
I will say that from a Freeman's point of view, again, the rental scenario is a big one, that if you know that you've got if you've had this trouble in the past, not necessarily that Freeman would be the one that you would rent a booth from, that we would build you something for a one-time use at the show, but there are rental companies, around in our industry that if an international company's coming in, tell them that they either have to take their booth in and pack out whatever they bring in, or they have to rent a booth,
Yeah, so this is a good segue to talk about floor donation and recycling programs. And I know, Jeff, you have a lot to share on that.
Right. So for the first time, I was involved with the CES show, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January. And they really didn't have a plan in place at the time for what they wanted to do. And so I went down there with the idea of I was going to just kind of test the waters. And so literally went to a few booths. I picked a company like Audi, which had a 5,000 square foot, huge 20-foot high booth. And I said to them, what are you going to do at the booth afterwards? Because their I&D house and everything was from Germany, obviously Audi. And so they said, we're just going to throw it away. And I said, really? I said, well, would you be interested in donating it? And they said, well, yeah, we'd love to donate it and make a story out of it. And so literally, by doing that, I went to Mercedes, Audi, Kia, Sony, Hyundai, and Samsung. And out of those 5 or 6 booths, I had 22 trailer loads of materials that we gave to Habitat for Humanity and 2 or 3 other charities. And I stopped with those booths because I was like, oh my God. It was already, we didn't even have a plan in place. So, but the point is just by asking, they were very excited to say, yes, we want an alternative. We don't want to throw it away, but we don't want to ship it back to our international, destination. So they don't look at the life cycle. They just look at getting it there and getting it set up.
It's a great example of the disconnect with the brands, right?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and most every one of those brands, if you go to their website and look it up, they have a very big sustainability policy, but in their event world, that's the difference.
But as the event planner or the show organizer or the facility or the general contractor, they're looking for you to provide the solutions to that, right?
Exactly.
So it's something that you need to think about when you're
well,
long-term planning,
and
right?
just to go a little bit deeper on that, is I'm getting ready to go and work with McDonald's down in Orlando next week, where they have their big event, and donations is a big part of their program. At the very end, they ask all of their companies and exhibitors to donate to the local charity. And what's really exciting down in Orlando, which I'm going to give them a little plug here, in that the Orlando Orange County Convention Center actually has a whole operating program where they have 20 or 30 charities listed in their program that they constantly are calling and giving and donating products to. And so what's exciting about that is that it's an organized program. Where I've gone to other cities where I've gone in and talked to the convention center and actually asked the CVB or someone, who's the charities that you guys give to regularly here? And they go, we don't know. We don't have a list. So I would encourage all of you, because there's a market there for all of us to find ways, if you're in a facility, to create a local charity network for the things that you see coming out of your facility constantly. Wood and metals, plastics, the signage that can be reused and repurposed. We do this a lot. Even the Visqueen in Las Vegas, the Sands, a big shout out to the Sands group, that they saw all this Visqueen on the floor that covers the carpet to keep it clean before the show. They went out and said, there's so much of this Visqueen coming off the floor, we've got to find a solution for it. And they went out and found a farm co-op outside of Nevada, and they're in Nevada, that would take all the Visqueen and repurposes it and uses it on the farms and stuff. So it's just amazing. There's a whole way. And that was all from a facility, just doing the research. So there's a lot of solutions out there, and we all see the need, so just working on it.
Great. So let's talk about the right way to think about signs and branding.
You actually made a point the other day, and several others made it too, which is that we tend to design unique signage for every show every year. And so it's got the date of the show and the city of the show on it, which means you cannot reuse it. Does that have it too?
Yeah, the date,
Right. And it can be evergreen signage.
We're all guilty.
Right, we're all guilty. Of course we are. And design firms love it when it's new every year, people like me. But the reality is that you can make evergreen signage if you don't date it and you don't indicate the city. So that for overall event signage, that makes sense.
Again, as long as we're not taping this and I'm not being seen by thousands of people online, hi you guys, for Freeman's sake, we make a lot of money off of signs, And so for me to say to you that every time you go to New Orleans and you go into on your website, you've said, we're coming to New Orleans and don't miss New Orleans and New Orleans and New Orleans. And when I fly there and I come out at the New Orleans Convention Center and I come there and I'm in the building, every sign in the building, the cafe says, welcome to New Orleans. It doesn't have to say that. I know I'm in New Orleans. I know it's 2014. I know, I'm at this AOA show, or I know I'm at this show,
Yes.
I know all those things already as an attendee or as a person. So not every sign has to have the company logos. I mean, you can have the company logo, but not the show logo on it. So you can use that cafe sign or the interactive stage sign or this or that sign, the background sign, can be generic, that can be packed up, shipped and saved and for the next year's show. So, cut your show budgets by just doing the signs that have to have it on them, in those spots.
And then there's another sort of nuts and boltsy thing, which is, and exhibitors can do this themselves, which is to reuse your substrates and layer new graphics over old graphics over and over and over and over again until they're literally too thick or too worn out to keep. Because the substrates that we use, there are much greener substrates than there used to be.
Right.
It used to just be PVC or masonite. It's better now, but still, that's a material that tends to get used one time and thrown away, and it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so we have the yellow light, so that means we're running out of time. So last question, what is the most challenging aspect of exhibit hall sustainability, and what does the industry need to come together to address?
I have a thought about that, and that is this. A convention hall is not, it's a place, but it's just a building that houses a community of companies that are coming together to create an experience for the attendees. It's the general contractor, it's the association that organizes it, it's all of the other installation and dismantle contractors, it's the exhibit houses, the exhibitors, all of the suppliers who provide security and food service and flowers and AV and everything else, right? Every single one of those companies has its own goals and priorities and need to drive profit and all the other things that go into it. So it's not very productive to think in terms, when you're organizing an event, to think that I'm going to find one person or one entity here and task them with sustainability. This requires getting your arms around a large pool of companies and getting everybody sort of on the same page around a shared vision so they can cooperate together. And you can use, I think, the general contractor, for example, to be a stepping stone to all of the other I&D companies. And you can use the event organizer the way you do to be a stepping stone to reaching all of the exhibitors. Yeah. And this is really what it takes, because everybody wants to play their part if they know what the parts are.
Great.
Right?
And I think, again, just to close up on the message, is that I work with Paul Salinger and the Oracle Open World team, and they have a green task force, and that's made up of all of their vendors, literally, and we meet twice a year, not on show, but before the show, and definitely meeting in ongoing 5-year goals. So we're not just talking about this year's show, but we're talking about over the next 5 years, what are we all doing to help his show become more sustainable and create less waste and less of a footprint. So as we all are meeting planners, we plan 4 and 5 years out where we're going to hold our event. We plan a lot of things way out there in the future. Just add sustainability to the conversation and how we're all going to work together as vendors and suppliers and facilities and organizers to get that same goal done. So that's
agreed. It's
collaboration.
Really all about planning and then communicating your plan.
Collaboration. Here we are.
Collaboration. All right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's
Thank
it.
you very much. Oh, Tom, could you sign my book for me when we get it outside? I'm shameless. But I love the book.
All right, thanks you guys, that was great. Okay, so moving on. So one of the things that we always talk about, and we even talked about it a little bit last night, was could we be doing a better job, or how could we be doing a better job of telling the story around sustainability and around what we're doing with events? How many of you have seen or know about the Annie Leonard Story of Stuff and Story of Solutions videos? Okay, so a few people. If you don't know about them, you should go check them out. The next presentation that you're going to hear is going to tell us a little bit about storytelling, and it's from somebody who was involved with those. So to introduce that session, what I'd like to do, though, is to introduce the Marketing Communications Manager from Double Dutch, Mr. Justin Gonzalez.
Thank you, Paul. So my name's Justin Gonzalez. I'm from a company called Double Dutch, which many of you probably are familiar with. And as Paul mentioned, the next session is all about how you can tell and get buy-in for your green story for your event. Now, we know that going paperless is an inevitable benefit to using a mobile application at your event. We get that. We understand that. But how do you get attendees to actually download that application and engage with the application? It's to give them an application that actually gives them a reason to. So at Double Dutch, one of our big things is all about social. So enhancing the networking opportunities within your application, making them or helping them to network smarter at your event, helping them to engage with your content on a deeper level. So those are just some of the ways that we at Double Dutch actually help you get attendee buy-in for your event. And our team is here in the hallway, and we'd love to chat with you about how we can do that for your events. I think our product speaks for itself, so without further ado, I'd like to bring up Jonah for his session. Let's give him a round of applause.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. My name is Jonah Sachs, and I guess I'll introduce myself today. I am the founder and CEO of Free Range Studios, and we are a marketing and communications and branding firm. And what we've been doing for the last 15 years is studying why some ideas and some messages go viral, and why sometimes people become evangelists for products or services or brands, and why sometimes with all of the right tools seemingly in place, they just fall flat. My experience started back in '99 when I started realizing that the world was changing and that people were going to be in charge of what they passed around and what they shared and what they evangelized, and that in that world, messages of passion were much more likely to spread than the next sneaker ad or hamburger ad. And that's really come true. And as I've experimented with all those ideas, I've learned one thing, that it's not how funny you are or how slick you are or how smart you are in the way you communicate. It's how well you tell a story. Because stories are what people build their worlds around. Stories are what people want to share. And today, I want to give you some really tangible, simple advice that you can use to turn your sustainability message into a story. As you heard before, I worked on the story of stuff, which was really about taking these world of facts about where our stuff is made and where it comes from, how it gets thrown away, and turning that mountain of facts into something passable. We released that movie to 10,000 people, and soon 30 million people had seen it. It became the butt of a million jokes on Fox News because they got so angry about what we were saying and called us communists, and it got shown in 1,500 classrooms to educate children about where their stuff is coming from and going. So I've seen firsthand the power of story, and I really believe some of these methods can help you do exactly the same thing. So before we jump into the future of storytelling, I think I want to just give you a chance to share your ideas on Twitter and to follow along afterwards. And I want to take you also back about 70,000 years before we leap into this new future that we're entering as communications change. So for all of human history, 99.9%, human beings evolved in these oral tradition societies. And an oral tradition just means that the way that we communicate is that somebody tells an idea to somebody else, and if that person finds the idea compelling, they pass it along, right? So oral tradition societies just basically share certain things. And our brains were evolved to communicate this way. First of all, it's survival of the fittest environment. If you're not interesting, if I don't want to share the idea you just passed to me or vice versa, the idea will die. Transmission is a web. Ideas move through social networks. People pass them on. They make them their own. While they make them their own, they might change them around. And they spread through tons and tons of channels. This is the way the human brain works. And as an organism, this is part of our DNA. This is who we are. But for the last 150 years or so, we turned that whole thing on its head and we entered what's the broadcast era. Now, many of you guys feel, okay, I've moved past broadcast. I use social media. I've got it. I don't need to know about the broadcast era anymore. But every one of us was raised in that era. And when we think about professional communication, we're just copying and copying that broadcast way. And the broadcast way is not the way that human beings like to communicate. First of all, it's not survival of the fittest anymore. It's survival of the richest. So ideas don't need to be compelling. They just need to be on TV or be on a billboard. It's not networks where the ideas move through. It's just one person blasting to millions. If you've got the money, you can get your message across, and your audience is probably sitting on the couch waiting for cheers to start, and they're sitting there. They got no other choice but to listen to your message. You don't make your audiences partner with you on your ideas because they're yours, and if your audience takes it and makes it their own, you can just sue them and take it back, right? And then finally, we just have one channel or one touch point. Let's get that 30-second spot locked up. Boom. Let's get that brochure ready. Let's get it out on the press. Boom. We're communicating. The world's not like that anymore, and yet our writing, our communication style, our brands are built as if it was. And the reason we don't change is because, one, we're not totally aware of what's happening, and two, it's just terrifying that the world is changing so quickly for marketers. So what's happening next? Where are we going? I think we're returning to something much more like that oral tradition. It makes sense. We're snapping back to where we belong, right? So now, people don't trust media that comes to them from an advertiser. We have all kinds of studies that show people are using their DVRs to skip over ads. They don't trust internet ads. They don't trust what's being told to them. They trust what they're getting through their social networks. And so what's coming through their social networks are lots and lots and lots of ideas. So it's survival of the fittest again. If they want to pass those ideas along, the ideas move around and they spread. They move through webs and social networks. Everyone owns ideas. They comment on them. They rate them. They make them their own. They kind of add their own color to it. And we are communicating through countless touch points. The only difference is that thousands of years ago, it took a story like The Emperor's New Clothes a couple thousand years to move from India to Denmark, where it got into the hands of Hans Christian Andersen. But now, ideas can move in seconds. And so can we master this new digitally empowered oral tradition? That's our goal. That's our tool. Now, what's going to survive here? And this is the kind of payoff for this whole opening part of what I want to tell you. Oral tradition societies didn't leave us much because they didn't have writing. What they left us were scraps and pottery shards and gnawed up bones, and they left us their stories. The stories that we tell today are still the same stories in different forms that we heard for thousands of years. I just had a Passover Seder last night, actually, the same story that's been told for 3,000 years or so. Stories are what survive the survival of the fittest landscape of the oral tradition. And if you want to tell your marketing story in this new digitally empowered oral tradition, the trick is to tell a great story. So how does it work? Okay, so first let me just tell you what a story is. There's a lot of talk about storytelling out there, and when I was working on my book, Winning the Story Wars, I realized I better figure out what a story actually is before I talk about storytelling, and I didn't really know. But really deconstructing it, this is what I came up with. A story is a bunch of characters or settings and scenes and the conflicts between them that play out on a landscape. So if I go to the movies and I say, oh, there was a car and it went down, it went on a chase, and this guy was chasing it, the guy got out of the car, the woman chased him, I'm telling you everything that I saw in the movie. You're not going to be very interested, but I'm telling you that sort of surface, that top level of the story. Now, a good storyteller doesn't just look out his or her window and say, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. No, everything is there for a very specific reason. It's to illustrate a core truth about how the world works, a moral of the story, right? A story well told sets everything up to teach us something about the world. It's what makes stories worth listening to. Again, it's why our brains are programmed to look for stories. They're kind of reality simulators that teach us how the world works. And the moral of the story is based on something even deeper, which are core values that storytellers want to share with their audiences. So the reason that my 6-year-old and my 4-year-old come to me every single day and ask me for another story is because they want to know what our family values. They want to know what matters to us. So if I tell you a story and the moral of the story is, he who hesitates is lost, you know that I value and want you to value risk and adventure and big rewards. If the moral of the story is better safe than sorry, of course I want you to value the opposite, right? I want you to value safety and security. So how does this all relate to our brands and the stories we're trying to tell? Well, the surface of the stories in these new digital landscape are really the thousands of communications that we have to produce every day, or every year at least, and our teams have to produce with us. Either those communications are all aligned around a core and relevant truth that we stand for and based in values that our audience care about, or else we're just blabbering. Who really wants to share through Facebook and Twitter? Who wants to make their own a set of communications that don't teach you anything and that don't point to core human values that really matters? If we think about our events or our brands or our organizations as a story, and we think about every communication as a little piece of that story unfolding between us and our audiences, told by us and told by our audiences after they go to the event and talk to their friends, and we know what values it's based on, and we know what that moral is that it all points to, we're starting to hold ourselves together as stories. So your brand or your event is an unfolding story across all touch points. And you can make every piece of the experience and every communication and every tweet a part of that story. And this is how we can survive in the digital era. But as we return to an oral tradition, we can't just say, okay, go tell stories and your brand is a story. That's not enough. We have to ask ourselves what kind of stories work. Because the old stories of the broadcast era are not the kind of stories that pass around today. To figure that out, I looked to this guy. This is Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was the guy who asked this same exact question starting about 60 years ago. He asked, what were the kinds of stories when given the chance that people tried to share? And is there a common template for all stories that matter? And he said yes. He called this story the hero's journey. And he said that every culture across all times has told this story, and you'll recognize the hero's journey too. Incidentally, if you've seen Star Wars, George Lucas called Joseph Campbell when he was stuck on his space opera and was like, I can't write this thing, what should I do? And Joseph Campbell said, it's really easy, just write it like this, and we have Star Wars today. So here's how the hero's journey works. It's used in Hollywood, it's used by novelists everywhere, and it can be used as well for your event or your brand. You've got this helpless outsider, and they're muddling through a broken world. So this is like a slave or an orphan, maybe an old person, the least likely person to save the day. So this is not the knight in shining armor coming riding on that horse. It's someone on the outside who has deeply held values but is really having trouble connecting to those values, and they think they can't really change the world. And when it comes to the sustainability crisis, we're all kind of like this helpless outsider, right? Because this problem is so big, and we don't know how to change it, but our values are telling us that something must be done. Now, things change for this outsider when they meet this interesting stranger. This interesting stranger is like Yoda or Morpheus or the fairy godmother in the story of Moses from my Seder last night. It's God. And the mentor says to the hero, you've got this great destiny. You can really do something. Life can be better. You can connect to your values. And the hero says, no, I've tried this before. It's not going to work. Moses was 80 years old and living on a mountaintop far away from Egypt. I killed a slave driver when I was a kid. That didn't turn out well. I'm not going to do it again. But the mentor says, no, you have a destiny. I need you to go on this this journey of self-discovery, and I need you to go fix the world. And the hero's like, really, I can't do it. Moses said, I stutter. Cinderella was just a girl sweeping ashes out of a hearth. And then the mentor gives the hero some magic gift. This is the lightsaber, the red pill, the ruby red slippers, and says, I can't go with you, but I'm going to give you this gift. And the hero says, you know what, this could really be possible. The hero goes and slays some kind of dragon and steals a treasure. Comes back and doesn't get rich or famous from stealing this treasure, but she has a gift to help heal the world. And then she becomes part of her community as someone who has helped make the world a better place. Campbell said when given the opportunity, people tend to share stories that make them feel that they can be the hero of their own life story. Not the kind of stories that make them feel inadequate, like if they don't buy the right brand or recycle the right way or go to the right event, that they're going to be losers and suckers, like all those other ads of the past used to do. It's the kind of thing that people say that make people feel empowered and strong. And like they can go from being that passive consumer to the active citizen in society. These are the stories that people tend to share and love. And this is good news for those of us trying to communicate about sustainability, because these are the stories that have always built society. So, thinking about this and thinking about our brand as a story, I've got some simple insights that can give you turning your brand or your event into a story based on the hero's journey. First of all, the hero of the story is the helpless outsider. Not the person who knows everything, not the person who's got the keys to the kingdom, but someone on the outside. So what does it mean? It means that the hero of your brand story is not you. So much of marketing is about how great we are, the storyteller. Who wants to be at a party with someone who's talking about how great they are? Nobody. Who wants to share on social media about how great somebody else is? Nobody. What we share through these kind of medium is how great someone else can be. We empower each other. So this is kind of typical broadcast marketing transposed onto Facebook media. We supply the power. So the brand is the hero. It's a one-way story with one character, right? Greatest conference in the world, best place to go. Talk about how great we are. And your audience you see as a kind of consumer, just another consumer. And probably if you're thinking in broadcast models, you're actually just talking about your audiences as consumers. In story engagement, we're talking about our audiences as the hero. It's not how great we are, it's how great you can be. Obviously, Nike's built this whole brand, not about how running shoes will make you better and faster and how we'll do the work for you, but how hard work and difficult achievement is really within you, and that's the way to succeed. Incidentally, for those of us working on the sustainability crisis, thinking about people as consumers as opposed to citizens who are supposed to do the hard work themselves is what's driving the sustainability crisis to begin with. And so communicating in this way is actually part of contributing to a more sustainable future. So lesson one, if you're constructing your brand as a story and your event as a story, realize that you are not the hero, but the hero of the story are the people that you're trying to move to action and to reach. Don't talk about how great you and your event are. Talk about how great people can be through a relationship with you. So if you're not the hero, who are you? Well, you're the mentor, right? The mentor is the person who says so much more is possible. Now, in the old stories, the mentor simply spoke in the voice of God, right? So you turn on the radio and someone would say, there's never been a better time to get a Cadillac. Come in today. And you would not ask yourself, who is that person? Because that person had access to broadcast media. It was sort of God telling you what to do. And it makes change mandatory. It tells you if you don't act now, or if you don't come now, or if the special runs out, you're going to miss out. But in the hero's journey, one of the central characters and one of the central dramas is really that relationship between the hero and the mentor. In the story of Moses, God is the mentor, and even he can't speak in the voice of God. He has to sit on the mountain for 5 days, creating a personal relationship with Moses to make him go. You can't push people. You make change appealing. You talk about the benefits and the excitement and what they can do through this relationship with you in a very human voice. I think when communicating around sustainability, we make the mistake of both threatening people and making them feel guilty and threatened, and then also talking to them from above, as if we're outsiders to this crisis and they're on the inside of it. And that's a huge mistake. One of the simplest things that you can do and that we can do, and that we do at Free Range, is we help people think of their events and their get-togethers as a character, using archetyping. This is a Jungian idea that we all resonate with certain characters, and if you can align your language and the feel and the places that you go around characters that make sense to people, you can move them to action. So some studies have been done with about 150,000 citizens asking them about particular brands and what archetypes they align with. Brands that align with archetypes tend to have a 1.5 times net asset value of brands where people can't tell. I don't know what that voice is, I can't tell. So is your event the rebel event? Are you standing up to the broken system and hurling stones to create a new way? Are you the pioneer? Are you all about future forward solutions? Are you the captain? Are you the establishment kind of brand? What is that voice, and how can someone really get to know you through everything in the experience as a kind of more human character? So when you write, when you communicate, when you create your experiences, access that inner Yoda and stop just kind of being that detached voice of God. No one listens anymore. Okay, the next part, at the heart of stories, is values. So here's like the old style of broadcast marketing. We focus on things like fear, greed, need for status. In fact, marketing was invented in many ways. Many pieces of marketing, like PR, political campaign ads, the first product placement, was invented by Freud's nephew, a guy named Edward Bernays. And he believed in what Freud said, which is that people are only driven by the most base desires. Things like fear, greed, need for status. In the old days, you could put an ad like this in a magazine and people would get scared. Like, look at this artistic dramatization of what soap does to you. And now look how Dove keeps you clean, right? Not very exciting or empowering, but what choice did you have? But Freud was not the only person who was studying human values. Abraham Maslow, at the same time, or a little bit after actually, came along and said, Freud, you've made a little bit of a mistake. You've been studying sick people. And so, of course, these people who are at the low points in their lives are motivated by these things. But what happens to people who are healthy, who are evolving? He found that there is a hierarchy of needs, and that people are not just driven by the most convenient, simplest, easiest, cheapest. People are looking for self-actualization. They're often, like that Nike ad, looking to do something difficult. They're looking for community. They're looking to be connected and to make a sacrifice. They're looking for justice. So what did Dove do? They changed everything. They stopped being about making their audiences feel ashamed and afraid and dirty, and started doing the exact opposite, saying that the beauty myth is a lie, and to stand up for the truth that all women are beautiful in their own skin. They spoke to this justice and truth value, and they've recently put together the Dove Real Beauty Sketches thing, video that circulated on Facebook and YouTube and was the most popular viral social media ad of all time for soap. Not by telling women that they wouldn't be clean if they don't use the soap, but by telling every woman how beautiful they are in their own skin and speaking to those deeper values. So, if you can share with your team and share among yourselves and in every communication, what are those values you're connecting to? What are those deep human values that aren't just about expediency, convenience, and fear? What are we speaking to? And if you look up Maslow on Google, he actually lists 9 values that all human beings care about. So think about Obama, for instance. Community is one of those values. When Obama ran in 2008, he didn't come along like a typical political candidate and say, I'm going to fix this country for you. He said this yes we can thing, right? We can fix this country together. Now whether or not he was able to deliver on this promise is a whole other conversation, but he was able to inspire a whole generation of internet activists by saying this is going to be hard work that we have to do together. Not the simple message that I can do it for you, but let's work together. So know what your values are and put them at the heart of every communication. And finally, there's the moral of the story. This is the core truth that every piece of the story should point to. So what is it that you stand for? You'd be surprised that when you learn what you really stand for, how much people will repeat it. You walk around your conference and walk around your event, and people will all be telling each other that core truth that you have put out there for them time and time again. Because if it matters to them and it resonates to them, they'll want to share it. It should be something that's not just about you or about the specific technical event that you're putting on, but about the larger world, about human beings. I actually have had a great experience with this myself in that I used to run an advertising and creative studio for social change. And one day realized, like I said, that it's stories that really get people moving, and it's stories that hold things together and get people excited. And so I started talking about not our studio as a creative studio, but as a storytelling studio. And I started telling people that great stories have always made great change possible. And that became the core moral of our entire agency. And now we don't have to tell people that. We get invited to events like this and to companies around the world to talk about storytelling because people associate us with storytelling. It's a larger, more important human truth that we don't own, but we're tapping into that goes beyond the technicality of what we're doing in the category that we're in to something that matters, because it may not be for every person in this room, but you tell many people that great stories are kind of core to human meaning, and a lot of people get excited and say, yes, that's true, that's my truth too, I love stories, I want to be part of this. So, for instance, Charity Water is one of the most successful online organizers and fundraisers. Doesn't just talk about delivering clean water to people. They tell stories about how every aspect of life is connected to water. And they've actually changed the whole entire landscape of the conversation through their stories that people understand and have started to repeat this core truth that people says, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. And every communication is perfectly aligned around it. Or Nike, as I mentioned before, this core truth that everything you need is already inside. Who doesn't want to hear that? Who doesn't believe that on their inside when they hear it and then want to share it? And Nike's been doing that with their Just Do It commercials for 20 years. Or Patagonia, who's aligned every communication around this idea that life is most enjoyable when you do the least harm. And recently they put out this advertisement, this Don't Buy This Jacket, which got them a tremendous amount of affinity and buzz because they're telling you to actually consume less, not consume more through their products. These companies put forth a tremendous amount of discipline around understanding what that larger truth they stand for is and finding creative ways to communicate about it. So instead of yelling louder and trying different quirky things to get heard in the marketplace, think about what's that core truth. Don't start communicating until you know what you stand for. And it should be something that stirs people's souls a little bit. And then work on the creative communication through your unique brand voice, through your audience as a hero, through values that get people to say, yeah, I stand for this too. So ask yourself, am I sharing something that truly matters? And again, think about, once you've got those core pieces in place, an understanding of your hero, an understanding of your voice and archetype, an understanding of your moral and the values, then every piece of the puzzle can fit together. And you can work with your team to ask yourself, are we aligned or are we all over the place? And just like a great storyteller who keeps a through line and a narrative, if your event and your brand does that, you will find storytelling success. And these are simple transformations that you can make. Simple brand map that you can use, just simply 5 parts right here. The one we didn't mention is the brand gift, and that's simply you can add as well. What is that differentiator, that piece of magic that we're giving people that make this journey feel possible? Identify those 5 things, put them on a page. It can be 30 words or less. Share it with everybody, and you're building a brand story that will last. This is my book, Winning the Story Wars, and it tells you not just about the kind of strategic side, which I just mentioned, but also about all the kind of tips and tricks to kind of get heard and make your stories compelling and want to spread, and a lot about the history of advertising, this change that we're going through in the landscape of the world we face. And if you don't like to read whole books, which most people don't these days, you can get a short version and a storytelling toolkit that'll get you working down this road at storytoolkit.freerange.com. And if you like that, we also have online trainings that'll help you actually build out these parts of your brand story and then deploy them in the world. That's it. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jonah.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you want to say about the work that you've done with Annie Leonard and Story of Stuff?
Yeah. I think the work that we've done with Annie Leonard has been a really amazing education for me, and a lot of these ideas come from that success, from understanding that success, which is that we've made 7 movies in that series, and we entered through something that people understood on a very personal level, a very simple level. It's a complex system, but she walks out in that first movie, and she holds up an iPod and says, do you have one of these? And everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, this is my story too. I do have one of these. Do you think it's going to be an ad for an Apple product? And then she takes you in a very tangible way through all of these different parts of the materials economy. And doing the problem statement was easy. You know, it's a 22-minute movie about the problem statement. Over the next 5 years, we engaged millions of people in the solution statement. And what Annie was so good at doing was really having that moral of the story, which is that citizens, not consumers, are the key. You can't consume your way out of this problem, but empowered citizens can do it. And I think by telling that story about water bottles and about cosmetics and about makeup and about Citizens United, Supreme Court decision, we've been able to cover a vast quantity of information and keep people watching these long videos because we know what we stand for, which are these like values of citizenship. And she's built 350,000 followers who she's actively engaged with through this thing to actually build that citizen, what she calls a citizen muscle. So I've learned a lot, and I've learned how a lot also about how it's not just green products that are going to save the day, but it's really activating people on values.
No, they're fantastic little videos, great storytelling. So thank you so much for
you.
being here, and thanks for sharing the information with us.
Thanks so much.
All right. Okay, we've got one more presentation to get us through the day. It's going to be a really interesting one, so I want you guys to all be awake. So I'm going to ask Anne to get you up for a minute and energize you so that you are awake for this next presentation, because it's something I want you to pay attention to. While she takes her shoes off.
I have a mic.
You have mic, okay.
And this was really heavy, great, interesting stuff. My brain is full. Now we need to only focus on our bodies, right? So get up. And I know there's some women here that have beautiful high heel shoes on. Follow my example if you wish. If you don't, if you're good at actually dancing with your shoes on, that's fine. This one is called Shaking Stevens. I don't know if he ever made it in the States, but he was really hot in Europe in the 80s. Yeah? He had this Elvis wannabe, right? Guy, you were hot in the 80s as well. All right, simple exercise where we use our entire body. First, you take your right hand and you shake it. Next, it's your left hand and you shake it. Your right leg, shake it. Your left leg, the other one, shake it, and then you shake your whole body, right? So let's do it slow. 1, right, 2, 3, 4, and the body. You got it. So what we're going to do is, and please count with me, we're going to do it first 4 times with the right hand, 4 times with the left, 4 times right leg, 4 times left, and then 4 times with the body. Next round is going to be 3 with each part, body part, 2 and 1. And then I promise you, your body will love you. Okay? You ready? And we're going to do it faster and faster. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Great.
All right. Thank you. Are you all awake now? All right. Okay, so I'm going to come back in just a second and introduce Jeremiah. But first, let's hear from Lindsay Roberts, the group director for Green Build from Hanley Woods Exhibitions.
Hi, so I'm awake now, but I also realize I have incredibly bad balance. Hi, I'm Lindsay Roberts. I'm part of the executive team with Hanley Wood Exhibitions. I'm a group director responsible for the Green Build International Conference and Expo. Hanley Wood is a business-to-business media company. We focus specifically within building and construction. Our exhibitions division is based in Dallas. We have 12-plus trade shows we produce annually. 6 of these shows are ranked in the trade show top 250 in the U.S., so they have a significant footprint. It's an incredible company to work for, great leadership, great talent, great culture. We know what we're doing. We produce very relevant, very operationally sound events, and they're quite profitable as well. So although it sounds like this might be a shameless plug for Hanley Wood Exhibitions, that is not what I'm up here to do. I'm up here to share a major oversight and a major miss we had in our business plan as it relates to sustainable meetings. Hanley Wood purchased Green Build from the USGBC last May. And although we realized we were purchasing this incredibly relevant, meaningful, sustainable building show, we had absolutely no idea what we were getting into in regards to the level of the sustainability that the event itself had. It was shocking, it was eye-opening. I saw it all come together last year in Philadelphia, all of USGBC's hard work, what they did from a sustainable aspect, and it just reminded me that we were very uninformed and we were very uneducated. So Kate Hurst, who was up here earlier, said something very simple and very profound to me on a conference call last May when we started our partnership. She said, Lindsay, it's not about what you take to a city, it's about what you leave in a city, and it's about the legacy you want to leave. It made me quickly realize that what Hanley Wood did not want to leave as far as our legacy was a massive pile of trash and waste that ended up in the city's landfill after we left. Just very eye-opening, very thought-provoking. So my reason for being here at GMIC is to show my support, Hanley Wood's support, to sustainable meetings, to GMIC, to our partners at USGBC. I hope I can come back next year and have a really cool story to share. I hope we can figure out a way to bridge the gap between this shining gem of sustainability that's Greenbuild and the rest of Hanley Wood's trade shows, which I will admit are not shining gems of sustainability. We can't get there alone. We don't have the know-how, we don't have the resources, we don't have the ability, but with partners like USGBC, with partners like Freeman, Jeff, I see you right there. You're going to have a lot of work to do with us. We can get there. We can make forward progress, and it can be something that we're really proud of at the end of the day. You guys should be proud. You guys do something very meaningful every day. I've been with Hanley Wood for 15 years, and I'm not more proud of anything I've done than what I've been a part of for the last year with Greenbuild and USGBC. So I commend all of you for having the depth, the passion, the know-how to understand the impact that your meetings are leaving on the cities and the environment. You should be incredibly proud. So thank you. Thank you for letting me share, and hopefully I have a really cool story to share with you guys all next year. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. Okay. We're getting towards the end of the day. Like I said, this is going to be a very, very interesting presentation that you're about to see. So first let me tell you that Jeremiah is not an events person. He's not even a sustainability person. But what he is working on is very, very much aligned to what we're doing. We started talking a little bit about disruption and innovation last night with our keynote, and even was a little provocative in the kind of the disruption of should we even be using the word sustainability. So I've known Jeremiah for about 5 years. He's one of the people who got me very active on social media. He's been very involved in social media up to, in his research and with the Altimeter Group. But he's come to a different place now, and he's doing some work around the collaborative economy and the sharing economy that I think is incredibly important. And the reason that I invited him to come and speak is because our industry is kind of at the brink of potentially being very disrupted by what's going on in the collaborative economy and in the maker movement. And so I'm going to have Jeremiah talk to you about the collaborative economy, and I want you to think about the areas that he's talking about and the potentials for disruption, and then how we can take advantage of it from a sustainability standpoint. Because part of what he's talking about is the things that we've been talking about in terms of cost savings and operational efficiencies. So please welcome my good friend, Jeremiah Oyang.
Thanks, Paul. That was an awesome setup. Thanks, everybody, for having me. So I run an association called Crowd Companies, and it's for the Fortune 500 who want to learn how to be part of this new crowd movement, which we call the collaborative economy. So let's talk about the collaborative economy. Maybe you've heard of some of these terms out in the market. Has anybody heard of Airbnb? Raise your hands. Has anybody stayed in an Airbnb in the last year? Okay, about a third of the room. Has anybody stayed at an Airbnb in this trip? One hand. How about Uber? Has anybody heard of Uber or Lyft? Did anybody take an Uber ride in San Francisco this week? A smattering of hands, maybe about 10%. So certainly we're aware of what this means. We've seen this on The Economist. We've seen this on the cover of Forbes. That's the CEO of Airbnb. And his company now, Airbnb, is valued at $10 billion. And that's a 6-year run. That company's been around for 6 years. Now, Wyndham Hotels is worth $8 billion, and Hyatt Hotels is worth $9 billion. Airbnb doesn't own a single convention center or hotel room. How do they do that? Okay, well, let's find out. Well, before we can talk about the future, let's talk about the past. I want to show you 3 phases of how the world has changed through these movements. About 10 years ago, we saw the rise of the internet era. Has anybody here was one of the early folks that created a website in 1995? Please raise your hand. I'd love to hear. A few hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow, some really early, it's about 7 folks. It's definitely early adopters. Now let's go back to 95. You had to know programming, HTML, JavaScript. And you probably had to use some antiquated software skills like HomeSite or Dreamweaver or Alaire, or just do it by hand. And you also had to have access to a server and FTP. This is not something for the normal person to do. It's complicated. But if you did it, take a look at this graphic, you could tell the world your story, just like we heard from Jonah. You were the voice of God. If you were able to publish on the internet, you had power. Now, let's fast forward to 2004, 10 years ago. We saw the rise of social media. That's when Facebook launched. And frankly, you don't need technical skills to publish anything on social. Frankly, you don't need social skills, but that's a whole other topic. But everybody now was able to democratize media. And we saw the Arab Spring, entire governments being triggered change through social media. It was a powerful effect up, and also the downsides, people do stupid things as well. And that's the social media era. Now, what's the next era? Well, I'm here to tell you. This next era, people are using the same devices and a few new ones. So they're using advanced mobile devices. They're using the Internet of Things, which is signals all over the world. They're using mobile payments apps, and they're using location-based data. Now, what are they doing? Well, in the last phase, people created media and shared it in social media, right? Many of you are tweeting now. I can see all the tweets. In this next phase, people are creating the physical world. That's called the maker movement. And they're sharing the physical world. That's called the sharing economy. They're also crowdfunding and creating their own currencies like Bitcoin. But collectively, what it means is the crowd is empowered to get what they need from each other. See, Airbnb doesn't own a single hotel room. They're just brokering it between other people. Uber doesn't own a single car. They're just brokering it between people who have idle time and who need a ride. In the collaborative economy, the people are getting what they need from each other rather than buying it from traditional institutions. It means the crowd is becoming like a company. The crowd is becoming like a company. Now, you're probably wondering, gosh, that sounds interesting. Wait, I might work for a company, or my clients might be a company. What does that mean to a corporation? Well, I'm going to walk you through a journey, and Paul and I are going to go on a business trip. Paul, are you ready to go? Okay, now on this business trip, Paul, we're going to tap the crowd. We're not going to buy from any brands. We're only going to get things from the crowd, okay? Now, before we do this, I want to just say that the collaborative economy, let me define what it is. This is an economic model where the creation and ownership and even access of all resources are shared between people, but I believe that corporations can have a place as well. Now, let's go into this journey between Paul and I so we can illustrate what this world is becoming like in this new market. Well, first of all, sharing isn't new. Our moms taught us to do it. In fact, this is why tribes formed, which became villages, which became towns, which became cities, which became megacities, which is 10 million people or more. And most of the world will be in a megacity by 2050. Most of the world will be in a megacity. Now, sharing's not new, but now we have technology to make sharing very easy to do. So let's go on this journey. So Paul, we need to travel. We're headed on a business trip to, let's say, LA. Okay? We're going to go to LA. Now, rather than hiring a traditional taxi company, let's tap the crowd. Have you seen these funny cars around town? They have the funny pink mustache. No, it's not a personal statement. It's actually a sign that we are an informal cab. We are the friend that will take you where you need, and this is called Lyft. And Lyft uses mobile apps, location data, and it finds idle resources, people that are available to drive, and it finds people who need resources in a marketplace and connects them together. And Lyft and Uber take 10 to 15% cut depending on the type of business model. So this is the theme in this market, finding idle resources and activating them with the Internet of Things, mobile, and mobile payments. This will all apply back to our conference today. I'll tie it all back together at the end. Okay, so we skip the cab company, we tap the crowd. Now, we get to the airport, and we're going to take the San Carlos airport, where a lot of Oracle executives fly out of, I've learned. And this is Surf Air. Did you know Paul now owns a jet? Actually, he doesn't own the jet. It's a shared jet. We all own it. For $1,600 a month or more, I forget the actual price, you can now be part of this membership, and you can fly Surf Air between San Francisco, San Carlos, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Las Vegas. As many times as you want, as much as you can fly, you and another person in leather-clad BMW chairs. Paul likes to go in style. So Surf Air means that the crowd has their own actual aircraft company, and we don't even have to go through TSA. Now, when we get down to LA, we need a place to stay. But rather than staying at a traditional hotel, we can stay at somebody else's home. Airbnbs are people's homes or their rental properties, like on VRBO or other places, and you can stay at these locations rather than stay at a hotel. Now, why would you do that? Well, we want a local experience in downtown LA or maybe in Huntington Beach, and we want to be like a local and be closer to the environment. We may not want to be in a standardized hotel room. This is why Airbnb is thriving. And there might be some cost savings, but not always. So now the hotel was like a hotel. Now, Paul's very successful in what he does, and we want to grow the company. So let's go get some funding. But rather than go to a bank, Paul and I, we're going to tap the crowd. We're going to get crowd funded from Lending Club. Now, Lending Club started off around 2008, and this is the trough of the recession. What happened? Well, people were screaming on the streets in New York and every city, Occupy, down with the 1% who are making money and were being foreclosed, up with the 99%, the crowd. We are the power. Now, Occupy, in my opinion, wasn't a big success. We really don't even hear about it now. But it was the trigger of how there was a need for the crowd to get what they need for each other. Take a look at this graph from the Lending Club site. It shows the amount of loans that they've done since their launch. They've done over $3.5 billion, this is a little out of date, of peer-to-peer loans. And the loan rates are often 5 years, and they can be around 5%, and they take 1% cut. And so it's a more affordable, it's like a virtual credit union in a way, but the crowd, they're lending to each other rather than going to a traditional bank. So now, Occupy used to yell about not having resources or other people are making money off of them. Now they can bypass banks like they wanted to. Occupy now has a business model. Now, we need to grow our company. We need staff. But rather than hiring a traditional consulting firm, we can tap the crowd. Meet Odesk, which is online workers. I'd also recommend for this audience to take a look at TaskRabbit. Have you heard of TaskRabbit? Yes? Okay. So TaskRabbit is physical people who have, in your proximity, like you're going to, I'm hosting my own event May 8th and 9th. I granted my events team a couple $100 to hire TaskRabbit. And they can use them as runners, go-tos, gophers, whatever. It's a great use for that. So tap the crowd rather than hiring a traditional consulting firm. Odesk, TaskRabbit. Now, we need a place to eat. This one blows people's minds. But rather than going to a really nice restaurant, and we want to have real Peruvian food or real Thai food. I just got back from Thailand. Where can we find that type of food? Maybe not really at a restaurant. So instead, we can go to somebody's house. That's right. Just like Airbnb is becoming hotels, Feastly or Cookening.com, homes are becoming restaurants. And these are popping up everywhere. All kinds of interesting questions around supply chain, regulation, safety, unique experiences, good and bad, are rising up. The crowd is becoming a company. Feastly. They can host their own restaurants at their homes. I worked with one company, and their tagline was, your neighborhood grill and bar. You know who I'm talking about, right? So in reality, this is truly the neighborhood grill and bar. Now, we need a place to work, but rather than working at a traditional office or renting our own lease from a big company on a 5-year loan, and I've run a company, Altimeter Group, and we are paying a lot of money per square foot in Silicon Valley, I don't need that. Now, today, in my current company, I pay $70 a month to co-work for a few days out of a co-working spot here in San Francisco in the most expensive neighborhood in Soma District, which we're very close to. And we can tap co-working. And when companies have idle space, they can now rent it out on sites like Liquid Space. So businesses are now becoming like property managers and activating idle resources, which is space. Get the trend here? Okay. Now, what about consumer product goods? We need soaps, we need towels, we need office supplies, we need whiteboard markers. What if we need stuff here in the conference? What if we needed stands? What if we needed a couch? What if we needed some ferns? What if we needed these goods? Well, now we can get them on a site called Yurtle.com, and there's many sites like this. Now, Yurtle's an interesting story. Yurtle is a website that is encouraging people to take photos of the idle assets they have in their house or office. You guys take all of your exhibit stuff and put it in a storage off-season, right? You're not using it. Why aren't you using it? Could you loan it to somebody else? Could you sell it to somebody else? Could you rent it to somebody else? This website and many others like it make it possible. Yurtle.com encourages people to share these goods. Now take a look what's on here. At the bottom right, there's a Dell monitor. There's also a bicycle and there's a PlayStation. How much does this cost? Nothing! It's free! You can share all of this stuff for free! Now here's the kicker. Guess what? This website is founded by the former chief strategy officer of Walmart, Andy Rubin. Andy Rubin is the former chief strategy officer of Walmart, and his mission of this company is to really make goods sustainable by everybody sharing them for free. And he says, I want to quote him, he says, the world's largest retail store and warehouse is in your garage and in your closet. Why don't we activate the things we already have? There's no reason to buy anything new. We can share what we already have. So imagine how Walmart responds to them. Now, if we can't share a good, let's make it. And recently, I'm pleased to announce that the United States White House requested to speak at our council at Crowd Companies, and of course, you say yes when the White House asks something. And they presented why they backed the maker movement. And this is when people, Americans, build their own products, and IP is made on site, and new technology is made on site, and innovation happens. The United States White House is hosting the very first Maker Fair this summer, where they will be showcasing the top makers in the world, in this country, on how they make their own goods. And there's a maker community in every city around the country and in the globe. It's a rising thing. Sometimes you'll hear them called Fab Labs. In Tokyo, there's a fab lab that produces furniture on demand from reused compressible materials. I heard earlier the speaker saying, don't print brochures and send them. Well, what if you could print furniture on site? This is a reality that could happen. Imagine there's a fab lab here in the bottom of this hotel just for the event industry. Now, let's put some numbers behind this. Paul, we had a great time on our trip, right? You're a busy man. But let's put some numbers. So UC Berkeley is the leader on car sharing. I'll just take the first segment, sharing cars. And the average car is used around 5% of its life. It's idle 90 to 95% of the time. Think about it. Most cars just sit there. You might drive it at most an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. Maybe if you live in Oakland, SF, could be longer. That's another story. But the thing is, we don't really use our cars. And UC Berkeley found out that if you share cars, one properly shared car reduces the need for 9 cars to be owned. Now, Forbes magazine says the average price of a car is $30,000. So to an auto manufacturer, a properly shared car has a $270,000 opportunity loss. But it's not just the car ownership, it's also car loans, which are going to be way over $270K, probably $500K. Then insurance, then gas, then bridge tolls and parking tolls, then dealerships, and then aftermarket. I could probably drop a financial argument that could show a properly shared car is $1 million ecosystem impact. That's the power of this new sustainable model. So the question is, what role does a company play in this space if this is a disruption that we cannot turn away from? What this means is the crowd is empowered. People are empowered. Now, what's causing this? I'll go through 3 quick causes. Actually, I'm going to tap you guys. I want to hear your thoughts on what's causing this movement. I'll trigger off 3 major things. There's societal reasons, there's economic, and there's technology factors. I'll kick off one, and I'd love to hear from the audience. Just raise your hand and shout out what you think it is. There's no wrong answers. Let's collaborate together. So societal factors. A recent study from Shareable magazine that said, here's the trend, 75% of people are going to share physical spaces and objects in the next 5 years. Folks, why is society wanting to share? I'd love to hear from you. Huh? The economy, absolutely, that's right. They don't have a choice with the recession. Consuming less stuff. Overpopulation, that's right. It's easier to get something from your neighbor than going to the store. It's the right thing to do. I love how Jonah was talking about our deeper inner values. Thank you. What else? It's an excuse for people to connect. I love that. That's right. What else? More toys. Yeah, you have access to more things. We have too much crap to begin with. Anybody have a storage container? Or I do. It's filled baby stuff. We're not going to use it. Everyone loves free stuff. In the back. Nope. Okay. That's right. It makes it easy with technology. You guys pretty much nailed the rest of the things I was going to say on this topic, but I want to go back to one thing you said, population. When I was born, there was 4 billion people on this planet. In my retirement age, the planet's going to over double to 9 billion. How will we sustain? There was a stat, and I don't want to make it political or anything, but it said if the whole world consumed like Americans, I'm an American, we would need 3 Earths today. China is quickly rising up and trending like how the Western society was. I was just in Thailand and Singapore this last week. You can see they're becoming more westernized. And then technology, you nailed it, sir. Mobile devices make it possible, and social networks as well, because you can use that as a trust verification system. So this movement is also heavily funded, and you guys nailed the resources. So you're probably wondering, okay, great, Jeremiah, you gave a definition. You showed an example how Paul and Jeremiah went on a business trip to use the crowd instead of getting things from traditional institutions. And we just collectively as a group talked about the 3 major reasons why this is happening. Now let's talk about the solution. What can companies do? And I'm very excited to show you. This is the collaborative economy value chain. And this is the solution. And we'll walk through each of the 3 phases and get to cocktails. And at the end, I'll tie this back into supply chain and also events. So really what's required in this market is business model change. If you are a company that makes products, you have to shift them to services. I'll explain and define what this means with real examples. If you're a company that offers services, you now must tap marketplaces. So if you are in the event service industry, you must launch a marketplace. And if you have a marketplace of people around you, you tap them to actually build your physical products. And that's just what we call this marketplace to products model. Let me walk through and help you illustrate what companies are doing about this today. So the first one is called brands as a service. We're seeing brands shift to now offer products as a rental, not for sale. Now, this isn't new. Netflix has been doing this for a long time. DVDs as a service. And Salesforce has been offering software as a service, as many other companies do as well. So this is not new. But we're seeing companies are changing their business model now. Have you seen, we've all heard of Uber and Lyft. We talked about that. Most of the room has taken an Uber ride. Did you know, to contend with this change of people not needing to own cars, that BMW and Toyota now rent cars here in San Francisco from their dealership lots? BMW Drive Now, and I had a tour with the team, is right over here, just a few blocks down, and they have lots scattered throughout San Francisco. You have a membership, it's like $80 to get in, then it's like you can rent a car for I think $80 a day, full day, and you get a relatively new 1 Series electric BMW. You walk up to it with your mobile phone, it unlocks, it starts, you go. You can even prepay for your parking spot. And you get out of that BMW and you never drive it again. And I talked to their CEO of Drive Now, and he said in the future, cities are so populated, we can't even sell more cars. So instead of selling 1,000 BMWs, we want to sell one BMW 1,000 times. So think about in the events industry, things that you are buying that are highly durable. Instead, can we shift to a rental model like the auto manufacturers already are? In fact, Home Depot is already renting their own goods and utilities. They're renting tools, trucks, and they even experimented with delivery, tapping Uber. In December, Uber, with a push of a button, would deliver a Christmas tree to your house. Now, if you're in an urban center, this makes a lot of sense. Uber drivers have time. They might have a car that could fit or a truck. Home Depot has the excess assets. Why not activate that and have the tree delivered? What's the Uber for the event industry? What's the most commonly needed thing that everybody needs, often on demand, that's highly durable? I don't know the answer. I know you guys know the answer, but that's a whole business in itself. But even for consumables, subscription models. So we see the Dollar Shave Club. They send men razors on a regular basis. And this is a subscription. You get a couple of shavers sent to you. And even for the ladies, 5 products from the beauty that are related to who you are as a person and the season are sent to you for about $12 a month. And this promises this a continual supply chain of this, and it makes it easier for the customer to receive these items. So this is part of this on-demand movement that we're seeing. So what could be the subscription model for physical goods in the event industry? Now Marriott is getting into this game too. They see the rise of co-working, and they know it's a threat. People are going to other people's offices rather than meeting in the lobby or their office centers. So they launched WorkSpring. And WorkSpring, and I visited their flagship testing spot in Seattle, is a co-working spot located in the lobby, but it looks very different. It looks like an office with modern furniture, and you can rent this out. So they're renting out these spaces to replicate. So imagine how you could tie in these co-working aspects or replicate co-working in some of the events that you're doing. People want to work and connect to each other. Now, the highest level that we're seeing in brand as a service is a complete different business model change. Peugeot has actually offered a membership to mobility, and this is called the MU membership, MU. And in this model, you have access to cars, share, van pool, scooters, and even buses. They don't make buses, they don't make scooters, but they know that's not what people want. They just want to get from A to B. So now you have a membership to this program. So imagine some of the smart vendors to the event industry. Imagine you could create a membership club with full access to whatever the exhibit resources that you need. And you could have different tiers of membership. And nobody has to own anything. It's a rental on-demand model. Okay, so that's the first model. And I tried to tie it back to our space here. Let's look at the next one, which is marketplaces. Now, as we move around this collaborative economy value chain, it gets more complicated, but the payoffs can also be higher. So let's talk about what Airbnb what can hotels do about Airbnb? They can't put listings on it. They can't do advertising. There's really nothing they can do to directly compete with Airbnb. So I expect by the end of this year, we will see a company launch, a hotel, excuse me. We should expect a hotel to launch their own version of Airbnb this year. That's crazy, isn't it? Well, not really. Brands replicated Facebook and MySpace and created their own communities. So we've already seen this before. Now, this model, this marketplace model, is already starting to happen. And I like how the panelists before teed up the Patagonia, don't buy this jacket. And here's the actual program that was related to that. This is the eBay and Patagonia partnership called Common Threads. And it's a marketplace to encourage you to buy the used Patagonia jackets before you buy the new. Is there a marketplace for the events industry for your durable goods and used goods? Oh, business opportunity. So imagine somebody built a marketplace, and I'll tell you who the vendor is that can supply this at the end. So you can actually create your own as a community and share the idle resources. When one industry is in season, the other season, another industry is off. Can you guys collaborate resources and pass them to each other? Patagonia is encouraging that. And we're even seeing Tom's Shoes launched a marketplace to encourage artisans to sell and resell their own goods. Marketplaces are an efficient model because you don't actually have to own any of the resources. So marketplaces are the second model, and it sounds like there's a business opportunity for the aspiring entrepreneur in this industry. Let's do the third one, and this is when we tap the maker movement. In the last two, I really talked about the sharing economy. In the maker movement, they're crowdfunding, they're crowd designing, they're building their own products. So imagine if companies could tap that and partner with the crowd to be part of their own business operations. Let me show you a few examples. Now, it requires us to think about the co word. And we've all heard of collaboration. I saw it all over those whiteboards back there. Collaboration was listed many times, collaboration. But now let's apply the co word to every single department in our company. Take a look at this little animation. How about co-funding, co-designing, co-developing, co-producing, co-delivering, co-storage, and even co-marketing? How can the crowd become our partner? How could the attendees become our partner in creating the experience with us? So we saw that Kickstarter beat Apple, Kickstarter beat Samsung, and beat Sony to creating the first digital watch that was smart. This is the Pebble, which was funded $10 million by the crowd. So what can companies do about tapping the crowd? Well, we're already seeing corporations tap the crowd for crowdfunding. Meet U-Haul Investors Club, where the investors are regular people like us. And you can actually fund one of the trucks. And it means you get a dividend every single quarter from the revenues from that truck. What if you crowdfunded your next conference? What if you share the revenues with the attendees? We're even seeing the co-designing that's happening in the consumer space. Nike allows people to co-design shoes, like the Nike ID and Nike Plus. You can design it the way you want. How can you enable your audiences and attendees to help design the experience in the way that they want? Here's how GE is doing it. They've partnered with a website called Quirky. And Quirky is an innovation startup. And the crowd submits ideas, all kinds of ideas. And these are from people that are not engineers or product managers. And the Quirky team selects a few of the products to be built. And they partner with GE for resources and supply chain. And you can see on the screen, these are all products that were built and designed by the crowd along with professionals. What if you launched for your exhibit or for your next conference a way for the crowd to design the conference? You can tap them for part of the innovation. And we're even seeing that Etsy is now partnering with companies like West Elm and Nordstrom. People are making their own products. Now Nordstrom and West Elm sell them at their own retail stores. We're seeing traditional corporations and the crowd partnering together. Now, what about 3D printers? Has anybody been to Maker Faire? They're all over the United States. A few folks in the back, here, there. Okay, about 10%. I encourage you to go to a Maker Faire. And a Maker Faire, which started here in Silicon Valley, it's been going on for a number of years, is a huge festival to celebrate people who make things. Whether it's woodworking or crafts or using 3D printers, people making drones or people making cars, they make all kinds of things. And I took some pictures on things that are being 3D printed. We all know about resins and plastics are being 3D printed, but we're also seeing that other types of materials like metal are being printed. And even full-size cars are being printed down at the Autodesk Gallery on the Embarcadero here in San Francisco. You can print out really complex things, and you can even print things in wood. This is wood fibers connected with cellulose. You can print out furniture. You can print out tchotchkes. You can customize all these things. Now, Nokia tapped the crowd, and they enabled this by, they encourage people to actually build their own cases and design them for their actual phones. So we're seeing some companies move into this space. Now, let's talk about supply chain. How can you tap the crowd, which is an important topic? This is Lockatron. It's a new device where the crowd can actually be your storage. Lockatron is a physical device, and you put it on a lock where there's existing locks. And you can unlock it with a mobile device and a mobile app. Now, where would you put a Lockatron? Wherever you need to store things. You could put it in a neighborhood. You could put it in a closet. You could put it in an office building. You could put it in the trunk of a car. And it means that the crowd can now be your warehouse, and you could store items in different cities and access them when you need it. Imagine if there was a Lockatron type of device somewhere here for this own conference, and anybody that needed access to tape or other things like that, you can quickly access it. And it's all done digitally and tracked. Now let's also talk about supply chain. We're seeing that big corporations are tapping the crowd. So Walgreens recently partnered with TaskRabbit to deliver pharmaceuticals to people's homes. Imagine how you could tap the crowd to deliver your exhibit materials and resources to wherever you're having a conference. Walgreens is already doing that. Here's another startup based here in the Bay Area called Barnacle. It's a kind of a cute logo, right? What's a barnacle? It's a little thing that might sit on a whale and go with the whale. Well, their business model is crowd-based shipping. Barnacle allows, like Uber or Lyft, a trusted network of drivers to bring things to different cities that are already traveling in that direction. Crowd-based logistics. And also meet Cargomatic. Cargomatic is using kind of the Airbnb approach for supply chain. They find big rigs that have empty space and storage. We heard from the excellent panelist on how it doesn't matter the weight of your exhibits, you're still moving a giant truck. Well, and the finding was that pack the truck as efficiently as you can. Cargomatic is an app that does just that. It's designed to do that. So for this conference here, we had exhibitors coming from many different locations. Why did they tie in, collaborate the supply chain for the logistics? Cargomatic. Local Motion. This one's also in the Bay Area. This is the Uber for corporations. And the way it works, it's an app like Uber for your organization. So imagine you're Home Depot and you have pallets and trucks all over the nation. What if you say, hey, does anybody have a whole bunch of bleach sitting around? If you do, let me know. Another group could say, yep, we have 2 pallets of bleach. We don't need it. Push a button. It'll come to you through the logistics. Tapping the crowd to find idle goods to be reused by another group. That's the spirit. That's what the focus is of this new market, and the crowd delivers it. And then one last example. Since there's a business opportunity in this market to share used goods, this company here, a few blocks away, called Near Me, is a white label eBay platform. You can create your own version of eBay and brand it whatever you want. There could be a GMIC marketplace where you guys can all share, sell, rent, gift your idle resources as one community. This software exists. So bringing everything back together on one slide. This is the collaborative economy value chain. It requires business model change. Products become services. We call that brand as a service. And we talked about BMW as a rental. So the big change here is instead of buying, you rent. And the second model, marketplace model, sell and reuse your used goods. You all have used goods and assets in your life and at work sitting there idly. Activate them. And in the third one, the crowd is already funding, designing, and building, and shipping and everything on their own. Tap them. Tap the crowd to become part of your company. Be more efficient. So let me summarize the 5 salient points and close things out so we can get to martinis. Number 1, people are empowered to get what they need from each other. That's the big trend here. Which results in the company the crowd is becoming like a company. And they will bypass inefficient corporations and institutions, just like they did in social media. The crowd is becoming like a company. 3, we can use these same tools and strategies to harness this movement to our benefit and be more sustainable and empower people. It's not going to be easy. It does require business model change. Products shift to a service model. If you offer services, you shift them to a marketplace model. If you have a marketplace, you get them to build your products. It's not easy. But if you do that, your organization becomes more connected. You empower other people. You have a constant source of innovation. It means your organization becomes more resilient to change because the crowd and your company now become one. Thank you so much for having me. Here's my contact information. Thank you so much.
Stay here for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, whose brain is officially spinning at this point? I know Tahira's is.
Spinning good or spinning bad?
Yeah, spinning good or spinning bad? Okay, good. So, do you guys get why I invited Jeremiah to come here? Do you get the tie-in to sustainability?
Good job, Paul.
All right. So, we're gonna forego the kind of little bit of recap. I'm just gonna do a little bit of housekeeping, but we do have a couple minutes. So, does anybody have any questions for Jeremiah?
Back over here. I was going to go make martinis.
Right here.
You mentioned all the things that have occurred, why the crowd is taking over and resourcing the crowd. I think the one thing to me that really is evident is that with social media in the last 5 to 6 years, we've allowed ourselves to become very transparent on a very personal level in everything except for our assets. So to me, the real transition has not to do with economy or being crowded in the cities, supply and demand. All of that existed before. What didn't exist before was that we were transparent. And now that we've allowed ourselves to be very visible on a day in, day out, we've numbed ourselves to that sort of lack of privacy. And with that comes a certain freedom that, well, you know, now that you know all about what I do on the weekends, yeah, you can hang out at my house. I'm cool with it. So that's what I actually think is really the biggest trigger as to why the crowd is now becoming comfortable to generally lending to someone they've never met before. You already know that I cycle on the weekends. That's all I was going to say.
Yep, that's right. And also to add that many devices are being built with Bluetooth capability or the Internet of Things. In fact, Oracle powers this with Java to make the maker movement. You can emit signals from lots of devices. And when regular things emit signals, like every laptop and phone here does that, now we can activate them and use them in a network.
I have a question.
Okay.
Back here.
Great.
Come up here. So the one question is, what about security, safety, all those concerns that are out there? I mean, that's kind of the forefront. Is there any fear of, you know, the one thing you get with corporations that you know, or consistency? And what's the other side of the coin? I mean, is this going to be something that will spin out because of that, or no?
Yeah, new business models will arrive for security and safety. In fact, we've seen a couple startups who really didn't work out. They were trying to foster a reputation system among all those different startups. And they were trying, it hasn't really worked out yet. But we're seeing new forms of reputation emerge. Did you know, so raise your hand if you took an Uber, ever, okay? Keep your hand up if you knew the driver rated you when you were done. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, 6, 7. So the driver rates you on how good of a passenger you were. And this determines on if they want to pick you up another time. And if there is a mismatch, they can actually do that. So we're seeing new forms of trust emerge. Also, on Airbnb, you can actually hit Facebook Connect and find other people who are your friends that are renting a place or a friend of a friend that stayed at a place. So we're seeing new forms of trust. And the last thing that we're starting to see is the third form, which is new insurance policies for this new type of shared world that are emerging. Uber and Lyft have launched that. But we're just at the starts. We've already seen deaths happen by Uber. We've seen people throw wild, I don't want to say it, parties at Airbnbs that are very inappropriate and adult themed. Leave it at that. And so we've seen some bad things happen and more will happen. And out of that, new business models will happen. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeremiah. All right. So I think we had an amazing day. I hope you guys think that we had an amazing day. Some great content. Some great collaboration, some fantastic energy in the room. I'm excited, and tomorrow is going to be just as exciting. So let me tell you a little bit about what's going on tonight and tomorrow. So if you're going on one of the dine-arounds, and hopefully you know which one you're going on, the bus for Tiburon Tavern is departing from the lobby at 7 p.m. If you're registered for Trace or Thirsty Bear Brewing Company, please meet in the lobby to depart on foot. They're both within walking distance at 7:10 p.m. So tomorrow morning, hopefully you've all signed up for the Sustainability and Action Tours. These are going to be fantastic. They all have a content lead. There's content attached to each one of them. There's going to be some great discussions, hopefully led by those content leads. So you'll be meeting in the lobby for your assigned tour. The tours have staggering start times beginning as early as 7:45, so please check your tour confirmation for details. The tour info sheets are also posted on the mobile app under Documents. We'll be serving coffee while the tour groups gather. Please be sure to eat something before you arrive. There's not breakfast tomorrow morning, so eat before you get going. We meet back for lunch out in the East Lounge, the foyer, at 1 p.m. tomorrow. Some of the tours break earlier, and we would encourage you to use this time to visit sponsors or finish your content discussions and get back in here before lunch. We will start up again with presentations at 1:30 back in this room. And then tomorrow evening, again, just a quick reminder, we get to celebrate at the recognition dinner at the Mission Bay Conference Center, sponsored by Aramark. Bowers will be providing transportation. Okay, so we're going to give you a little bit of a break now so that you can go change and kind of refresh yourselves and get ready to go out to dinner and have a good time. Thank you so much for all of your work today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, or tomorrow afternoon now, and have a great evening. Thanks so much.
Wow, so we had a lot of really interesting ideas being shared. This last kind of block of time with all the interviews, talking about the collaborative economy, talking about how to tell your brand story or the story of your event, and all sorts of metaphorical tips from Joseph Campbell and integrating that whole hero-mentor myth structure, as well as some really amazing practical tips on how to minimize waste and reuse components from a trade show perspective. So if you missed any of that, that content is on the earlier part of this broadcast. We have a collaborative document that I've been taking notes and parking thoughts on, along with some of our other audience members. And you can find that at ez.com, that's the letter E, letter Z.com/GMIC notes. So that will be our takeaway. So, building a bridge to a new future, I think today gave us a lot of things to think about. I had gone over some of the big actionable ideas that people came up with in small groups during our break. There are 3 that I had missed telling you about before we started. So one of those falls under Revolution, which is create a consolidated and reliable database of sustainable providers by city and items. There's a nationwide resource. Co-location, have associations that have similar interests and goals partner up so they can meet at the same hotels at the same time. Under collaboration, sharing resources, which fits very nicely with what we were talking about, the collaborative economy, having cities and CVBs work together collectively to share information and understand sustainability big picture. And then last but certainly not least is the future of GMIC. Who we are, what we have to offer, how we build a sustainable business model, and clarifying the target audience. GMIC should be the go-to place for sustainability. So does that mean that we should stop limiting ourselves just to the event audience? Do we need more chapters or more advocacy? So along with that, and the practical tips we got and things that we were just hearing Jeremiah talk about in terms of how we need to restructure our business model to become more relevant, and how, what is the Uber of the events industry? It's a lot to chew on. If you have thoughts about that, please share them with us. Tag your tweets or your posts or your pictures with hashtag GMIC 2014 or tweet directly at me at PYM Live. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and until tomorrow, there are going to be some tours in effect, and during those tours, people will be posting and sharing pretty much from 8 a.m. until about 1 p.m. Pacific time. So if you follow the GMIC main hashtag, you'll be pretty caught up. Also in that easy.com/GMIC notes, I have all of the hashtags listed. So if there's one that you're particularly interested in, like maybe following the San Francisco Union Square Hilton tour, or going to the farmer's market in Cowgirl Creamery, or seeing what the Moscone Center does back of house with its food and beverage, you can find those hashtags and follow along. People should be posting on those dedicated streams until about 1 p.m., and then I'll be bringing things together for a Storify recap. And our next broadcast is going to start 2 o'clock tomorrow Pacific time. So until then, plan well and prosper, friends.